July 31st, 1964, 4:51 in the afternoon. A single-engine Beechcraft Debonair is 9 minutes from the Nashville airport when the sky ahead of it turns black. Inside that plane is the most famous voice in country music, a man they called Gentleman Jim, a man whose records are outselling half of Nashville combined. At the controls, Jim Reeves himself. He radios the tower answers, and then, at 4:52, the radar screen goes quiet. No mayday, no signal, nothing. A few miles south, in the town of Brentwood, another country star, Marty Robbins, is standing outside his house watching the storm roll in. He hears an airplane engine climbing over the rain. Then he hears a sound he will never forget, a thud. Marty runs inside and tells his wife 6 words. Someone's just been killed out there. He is right. But here's what he doesn't know. He doesn't know that the man in that plane is his friend. He doesn't know that 2,000 people will spend the next 44 hours searching for a wreck that is lying 400 yards from a major road. And he doesn't know the strangest part of all. 16 months earlier, Jim Reeves stood over the coffins from another plane crash, Patsy Cline's plane crash, and swore a vow. He said the words out loud, again and again, to anyone who would listen. You can't make a mistake in an aircraft. So the question of tonight's story is very simple. Why did the most careful man in country music fly straight into the one storm he spent his whole life promising to avoid? Stay with me, because the answer is buried in a 44-hour search, one final song, and a widow who paid a price nobody talks about. Welcome back to Country Mysteries. I'm Roman, and tonight we are opening one of the heaviest files in this entire series. Jim Reeves, the velvet voice, the man who made country music sound like silk, and died in a way that made no sense to anyone who knew him. This is not just a story about a plane crash, it's a story about a promise made over a friend's coffin, repeated for 16 months, and then broken in 60 seconds. Grab a seat, this one hurts. To understand what was lost in those woods near Brentwood, you have to start in a place called Panola County, Texas. August 20th, 1923, a cotton farm, 9 children. A father who dies before Jim's first birthday. This is poverty, real, dirt floor, East Texas poverty. The kind of childhood this show keeps running into, episode after episode, like a signature at the bottom of every legend. And young Jim Reeves has exactly one ticket out. It isn't music, it's baseball. He's a pitcher, and a good one. Good enough to sign with the Houston Buffaloes organization. For a few years, the plan is working. And then, one afternoon, he pushes off the mound, feels something tear in his leg, and the plan is over. Just like that. A blown nerve in an ankle, a pitcher who can't pitch. Funny thing about fate in these stories. It always closes the front door before it opens the strange one. Jim limps into radio work, becomes an announcer, starts singing on the side. And in 1952, at the Louisiana Hayride, the same stage that launched Hank Williams and would soon launch Elvis, the story goes that a scheduled star doesn't show up, and the young announcer with the deep voice gets pushed in front of the microphone. Within a year, a song called Mexican Joe goes to #1. The cotton picker from Panola County is suddenly a star, but he's not the legend yet. The legend arrives when Jim Reeves does something no one in Nashville had dared to do. He gets quiet. See, in the 1950s, country singers shouted. They belted over honky-tonk noise, fighting the fiddle in the crowd. Jim Reeves looked at that entire tradition and turned it down, literally. Working with guitarist and producer Chet Atkins at RCA, he dropped his voice to its natural low register, leaned in close to the microphone, and sang like he was telling one woman a secret at 2 in the morning. The suits at the label argued against it. Jim insisted. And in 1957, a song called 4 Walls proved him right. It didn't just top the country chart, it crossed over to the pop chart, where country voices were not supposed to go. Then, in late 1959, came the big one. He'll Have to Go. Put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone. 14 straight weeks at #1 on the country chart, #2 on the pop chart. Around 3 million copies sold. They started calling him the man with the velvet voice. And the sound he helped invent, smooth, orchestrated, deadly calm, became the Nashville Sound itself. And the hits started arriving like a train schedule. Blue Boy, Billy Bayou, Home, Am I Losing You? In the studio, he was famous for being a merciless perfectionist. Takes repeated over and over until every syllable landed exactly where he wanted it. The session players joked that the microphone was afraid of him. Chet Atkins didn't joke. Chet Atkins later said Jim Reeves had the best natural ear he'd ever worked with. And here's the part almost nobody in America ever understood. Overseas, Jim Reeves wasn't just big, he was bigger than Elvis. In South Africa, he was the best-selling artist in the country's history at the time. So beloved, they put him in a movie, Kimberly Jim. In Britain, in Ireland, in Norway, in India, his records sat in homes like family photographs. By 1963, Jim Reeves wasn't a country singer anymore. He was a global empire with a Texas drawl. He toured Europe. He toured Scandinavia, where his records went top of the charts in Norway, a place most Nashville stars couldn't find on a map. He came back from Britain with television bookings and a single climbing the UK chart. RCA executives quietly admitted that outside North America, their biggest American act wasn't the king of rock and roll. It was the quiet man in the sport coat. An empire that ran on one engine, his voice. And in March of that year, that empire got a warning with 4 coffins in it. March 5th, 1963, a Piper Comanche goes down in the woods near Camden, Tennessee. On board, Patsy Cline, Cowboy Copus, Hawkshaw Hawkins, and the pilot, Randy Hughes. If that story sounds familiar, it should. We told it in episode 2 of this show, the night country music lost 3 stars in one crash. Nashville goes into mourning, and Jim Reeves goes into something else, something colder, anger. Because Jim Reeves is a pilot himself. He owns a single-engine Beechcraft Debonair, and when he looks at the Camden crash report, he doesn't see bad luck. He sees a series of choices, a pilot without instrument training pushing visual flight into weather that couldn't be flown by sight. According to his own guitarist, Leo Jackson, Jim said it over and over in the months that followed. That's the reason they're all dead. You can't make a mistake in an aircraft. Let me repeat that, because this sentence is the entire mystery of tonight. You can't make a mistake in an aircraft. He vowed, out loud, repeatedly, to the people closest to him, that he would never do what Randy Hughes did, that he would never gamble his life against weather. For 16 months, he kept that vow. Remember the date of the Camden crash, March 1963. Now watch the calendar, because fate, in this show, always keeps receipts. Summer 1964. Jim Reeves is 39 years old and standing on top of the world. And then comes July 2nd, 1964, a date that country historians still talk about in a lowered voice. Jim books his final 2 recording sessions at RCA Studio B. He cuts Make the World Go Away. He cuts a song called Missing You. He cuts another called Is It Really Over? Look at those 3 titles again, sitting in a row on one session sheet 29 days before his death. And then it gets stranger. The session ends early. There's studio time left on the clock. Jim could go home. Instead, he tells the room he wants to do one more song, unplanned, off schedule. He steps to the microphone and sings, I Can't Stop Loving You. And that is the last thing Jim Reeves ever records. His final note on his final song, chosen by nobody but himself. Now, is that an omen, or is it just an ordinary Thursday that history repainted after the fact? Hold that question, because in this story, it won't be the last time you ask it. 4 weeks later, late July 1964, Jim flies his Debonair from Nashville to Batesville, Arkansas. The trip is pure business. He's closing a deal on a piece of mountain property, a quiet retreat away from the noise. Traveling with him is Dean Manuel, his pianist, his road manager, his right hand. 30 years old, a wife and kids at home. On the afternoon of July 31st, the 2 men take off from Batesville and point the nose toward Nashville. 2 hours of routine flying, and then, on the final approach, with the airport almost in sight, the sky ahead fills with a thunderstorm. Brief, violent, sitting directly across the flight path. And here, at 4:51 in the afternoon, Jim Reeves faces the exact test he had been preaching about for 16 months. The Randy Hughes test. Weather ahead, options available. He could turn, he could divert, he could land short and wait it out on the ground with a cup of coffee. Every rule he swore by says, do not fly into that rain. He flies into the rain. And 1 minute later, the tower asks his position and gets static. Why did he do it? Nobody will ever know. Maybe he trusted his instrument training. Maybe he was tired and home was 9 minutes away. Maybe the storm read smaller on the windshield than it was. All we know is what happened next. Inside a heavy downburst of rain, with the ground invisible below him, Jim Reeves lost the horizon. Pilots have a name for what follows: spatial disorientation. Your inner ear starts lying to you. Up feels like down. A turn feels like level flight. Investigators concluded the plane came out of the cloud in a steep dive, and Jim, disoriented, may have believed he was climbing. At 4:52 in the afternoon, the Beechcraft Debonair went into the trees near Baxter Lane, outside Brentwood, nose first, engine at full power. The men in the tower kept calling his number into the storm. N8972 Mike, N8972 Mike. Nothing came back. It was over in 1 second. And then began the part of this story that Nashville has never forgotten, the 44 hours. The plane vanished at 4:52 on a Friday. It was not found until Sunday morning, 44 hours. And what happened in between was the largest manhunt in Nashville's history. 2,000 people, 20 square miles of soaked, tangled Tennessee woodland, helicopters, civil defense, police, and walking shoulder to shoulder with the volunteers, the biggest stars in country music. Eddie Arnold in the mud, Ernest Tubb calling Jim's name into the trees, Chet Atkins, the man who built the Velvet Sound, searching for the man who sang it, Marty Robbins, who had heard the thud with his own ears, directing searchers toward the sound. Think about that picture for a second. An entire industry on its hands and knees in the wet grass, looking for its king. The search was so enormous that reporters flew in from out of state just to film the crowd looking for the plane. For 2 days, radio stations across America refused to say he was dead. They said missing, they said unconfirmed, they played his records between updates. Fans held vigils. And the wreck, this is the detail that still hurts. The wreck was lying 400 yards from Franklin Road the whole time. The trees had simply swallowed it. On the morning of August 2nd, a search team pushed through the brush and found the debonair, and Jim Reeves and Dean Manuel still inside. At 1 o'clock that afternoon, radio stations across the United States began the announcement. Gentleman Jim was gone. He was 40 years old. 2 days later, thousands lined the streets of Nashville as a flower-covered coffin rolled slowly through the city, then made the long drive home to Texas, to a grave near Carthage, in the same East Texas soil he'd spent his whole life escaping. And that should be the end of the story. It is not the end of the story, because Jim Reeves was about to do something no dead man had ever done. He was about to get more famous. His widow, Mary Reeves, had been running the business side of Jim's empire for years, and in her grief, she discovered something extraordinary in the vaults. Jim, the perfectionist, the workhorse, had left behind a mountain of unreleased recordings, some polished, some just his voice and a guitar. Mary and RCA began releasing them, and the world, it just refused to let him die. 1965, new Jim Reeves hits. 1966. And here the story breaks every rule in the music business. A track called Distant Drums, recorded years earlier as a simple demo, is dressed in strings and released as a single. In Britain, it climbs to #1 and stays there for 5 weeks. While it sits on the throne, it holds off a little band called the Beatles. 1966. The Beatles at their absolute peak, and the #1 artist in the United Kingdom is a country singer from Texas who has been dead for 2 years. In the US, it topped the country chart for 4 weeks, and it didn't stop. Jim Reeves kept scoring hits through the 60s, through the 70s. Year after year, a man who no longer existed kept walking into the top 10 like he still had a key to the building. More than 24 chart hits released after his death, a run the living could only envy. In 1981, producers took his old vocal tracks and blended them with the voice of Patsy Cline, and the duet became a hit. Listen to what that actually is. 2 friends, both killed in plane crashes 16 months apart, singing together on the radio 17 years after their deaths. Country radio called it romantic. I'll let you decide what to call it. In 1967, 3 years after the crash, Jim Reeves entered the Country Music Hall of Fame, one of the youngest legacies ever enshrined there. The empire kept growing, the voice kept selling, but somewhere behind the gold records, this story has one final chapter, and it's the cruelest one. Mary Reeves gave the rest of her life to that legacy. For over 3 decades, she ran Jim Reeves Enterprises, guarded the tapes, built the museum, answered the fan letters. Nashville called her the keeper of the flame. And then age came, and illness, Alzheimer's, slowly taking the memory of the woman whose whole life had become an act of remembering. And as her mind faded, the vultures landed. In the 1990s, the Reeves estate, the tapes, the memorabilia, the rights, the museum, passed in a questionable deal into the hands of a businessman with a bank fraud conviction in his past. He promised the press he would protect Jim's legacy. Then the assets were liquidated, the museum was gone, and according to those who fought for the family in court, Mary was taken for millions before the bankruptcy filings started. Mary Reeves died in 1999 in a nursing home while lawyers argued over what was left. The woman who kept a dead man's voice alive for 35 years, forgotten in a hallway while strangers sold his gold records. If you've been with this channel since our Willie Nelson episode, you already know the pattern. In country music, the artist dies once, the estate dies twice. So let's open the file one last time and lay out what we actually know. On the record, the vow was real. Jim Reeves spent 16 months telling everyone that weather flying kills, and you can't make a mistake in an aircraft. The final session was real. Make the world go away, missing you, is it really over, and one unplanned goodbye called I Can't Stop Loving You. The storm was real, the disorientation was real, and the official finding was pilot error, the exact error he swore he'd never make. The 44 hours were real, with 2,000 people searching while the wreck lay 400 yards from the road, and the afterlife was real. A dead man outselling the Beatles, duetting with Patsy Cline, and filling the Hall of Fame, while the widow who made it all possible was quietly picked clean. That's the record. Now comes your part. 3 doors, as always. Door number 1, the weather. A brief freak storm sitting on the one path home, a trap that could have killed any pilot, vow or no vow. Simple, brutal bad luck. Door number 2, the man. The most careful voice in Nashville, 9 minutes from home, tired, confident, certain that the rules that killed Randy Hughes didn't apply to him that afternoon. Not bad luck, a broken promise. And door number 3, the machine. The one that never grieved for a single day. The business that discovered a dead Jim Reeves sold better than a living one, kept the voice singing for decades, and didn't stop squeezing even when the only person left to protect was his widow. Which door do you walk through? Weather, pride, or the machine? Drop your verdict in the comments. I read every single one. And before you go, next week, this series walks into the one building we haven't dared to enter yet, the Grand Ole Opry itself. September 1965, the biggest outlaw in country music stands on its sacred stage, takes the microphone stand, and drags it across the footlights, smashing every bulb in the row. The Opry shows him the door. His own hero tells him he's finished. And what happens to Johnny Cash in the 7 years that follow is either a punishment, a redemption, or the greatest comeback ever staged. That's next week on Country Mysteries. If tonight's story stayed with you, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments where you were when you first heard that velvet voice. Until next week, keep the volume up and the headlights on. This is Country Mysteries. Good night.